it's been a long evolution since then, both to refine the brushes, which honestly, every batch I make, I try and improve them a little bit.
Okay, we're live. We're happening.
Cool. So once again, nice to meet you. It's nice to actually get a chat with you and talk with you. This technology is so great, but I spend most of my time here at my studio, but I just haven't been able to use broadband. This is literally the second time I've been able to do it from this location.
So you're at your studio now then?
Yeah, I had the curtain that I have up behind me is my wall of tools where sitting at the desk where I usually put the brushes and the handles together. And I just finished a really big build yesterday and spent probably 4 hours yesterday evening gluing the two pieces together so that they work properly. And I haven't even gone in to look at them yet. So that's later today. Wow. And so, yeah, it's cool to see your studio live too. I of course, seen you on YouTube several times. And you do just a superb job.
Yeah, I have a working studio. I've got kids' art and my art and students' art all over the place. It just makes me happy.
Here too, it's my favorite place to escape to. Yeah. And let me just do one quick change. I haven't used my notebook for a while, and so I just want to be sure that I can hear you okay.
Yeah, there seems to be a bit of a feedback. I'm not sure if that is happening here, but I'm sure it's all going to work out. I'm excited to hear more about your brushes. I have my little collection here that, you know, that I use, and I think I've mentioned a million times. This little guy is my favorite. I don't know what I would do without it. It's a little medium go-go blend. I love the little click on the handle. And when it arrived on the door, it was like it had been made specifically for me. It just fits in my hand. I paint entire paintings. I've painted, you know, 2 feet by 3 feet paintings just with this one brush.
I can believe it, and thank you. It's a huge compliment to say that because you do superb work, and that it's so versatile to keep up with you. It says something good. So I am touched. I might blush a little bit from that one. I love doing my work, but I've never been the best about talking about it or socializing it. It shows you hawk it, but it's a really different thing when people are working with my magic paper compared to actually producing art on the caliber that you do. And it's really an honor. I yourself and a few other people that have been nice enough to show off my brushes, and it blows me away. I hardly have words for it.
Well, it's totally mutual, you know. It's if it wasn't for these brushes, most of us wouldn't use them, wouldn't be experiencing the joy and the feedback that we get from what we can create with them.
Well, I am truly honored. I really am. It's called a win-win situation, and I always like it when that happens.
Yeah.
And so the Coat & Synthetic blend is one of my most innovative. When I first started this out, I bought brushes from just about every brand you can think of. And I literally tested them, painting with them, look how they felt in the hand. Actually took a lot of them apart to see how they're made. It's called reverse engineering. And I took what the best did, which is a story unto itself, and then left the rest behind. And I'm very competitive by nature. So I started out with just the goat hair, which is a real traditional brush. The goat hair I use is actually designed for makeup brushes. So it's cleaned twice, and it's really high quality and very uniform. And I was able to find it from a supplier that was going out of business, and just a huge store for me. And then from another supplier, I found I call it synthetic sable, and I realized that the goat hair does everything right except it has a really crappy point on it. I mean, it's there, but you have to have superhuman skills to actually do fine detailed work with the goat hair brush, and most of us just don't have that. So I put the two together and made the synthetic just a little bit longer than the goat hair, and there you have the result of it. It's been a runaway bestseller the entire time.
And you know, Tracy, I've had this brush for years, and that point is still exquisite.
Well, thank you very much. I use the best materials I can get my hands on across the board, and it is one of the tributes to the good luck I had when I was starting this out. I knew what my cousin, well, let me digress a little bit. My cousin made brushes for a long time, many, many years, 20 years plus before I started. And when I was much younger and in college, we used to hang out together and do the things that cousins do. And he liked to talk about the business part of it, going to art shows and traveling, but not so much about the making of the brushes. So I ended up, he passed away in 2008, and almost, I think, 8 or 9 years later, I decided it would be really cool to do a little bit of what he was doing. And so I started down the path. I had a little more than photos to work with. And I kind of recreated the whole thing based upon a few photos of his work, and of course, a lot of other stuff for brushes. And it's been a long evolution since then, both to refine the brushes, which honestly, every batch I make, I try and improve them a little bit, but it's often only obvious to me how they're improved. Some of it is the production technique to make my life a little bit easier. And some of it is the tools that I use that helps me produce better results. And anyway, so he did that, and then I started making brush bristles in 2014, and in 2016 is when I started to do my first art show. And from the very first show, it was just a runaway success. Before I was doing this, I was doing another form of art, so I knew something about the show circuit, but not as interactive as you are with brushes. So
right, you were a photographer, weren't you? A
yes,
photographer?
I did. Yes, I did.
You are a photographer, I should say.
And well, I was. I haven't done it so much in recent years. I did traditional single subject photography a lot, like with paintings, but using a camera and a lot of post production. And then a friend that I met on cyberspace, really famous guy. Maybe another time I'll go into detail about that. But he did what was called digital stitching, which is a brand new thing. It's where you take several images side by side, and then you can get a much wider field of view than you can through a traditional camera. And because you use multiple images, it's a super high resolution result. And so I was able to do things that are like 4 feet by up to 10 feet long, and hawk those at art shows for quite some time. That led to my getting injured. I got an inguinal hernia, the risk of too much information, and got that fixed through surgery. The doctor said, no more heavy lifting for you. And so that was the motivation for me to start working with brushes. The shows kind of get in your blood, and they're very, very fun to do. It's a lot of work, but I'm a workaholic from years and years of practice at it. And I took to it like a fish to water. And so I was lucky from the beginning. My first show was in Seattle, and then I booked into a lot of other local shows. In my third year, I was able to get in many of the top shows in the United States. Which just doesn't happen, it's because I'm kind of a unicorn. Nobody else does what I do.
Right.
And because I had literally one of the best teachers on earth, I was able to start at a very high level from many elements. I knew something about the shows and the business side of it, and I knew how to apply to them. And because I'm the person I am, I know how to do things that are on pretty good. The photography you have to do to get into shows. A lot of people do really good art, but they really don't know how to use a camera, and it hurts them. And I know how to use a camera, and I also know something about post-processing. And so I was able to get really good results. And that brought us to this conversation. Fast forward about 10 years, and I've been just the luckiest person. I could go on and on about this. And the coolest thing was, it wasn't cool at all, but at the outset of COVID, as it worked out, literally 1 month before COVID became widespread, I had launched my website after about, I think it was 3+ years of working on it in spare moments while I was doing shows and traveling to shows and so forth. And shows, of course, came to a complete standstill. I was in, where was I? I was in Atlanta. I just flown to Atlanta that morning. And I remember I stopped at a McDonald's. I have to get a bunch of supplies at that other destination. And I had stopped at McDonald's to get lunch. And I got an email from the show organizer. This is the American Craft Council group. And they said, oh, the show is canceled because of COVID. And I had packed like gloves and masks and sanitizer and everything just because I knew there was a risk. But I was literally 20 minutes away from the show when they canceled it. And so on the heels of that, I started to reach out to artists in the same way I reached out to you. And and a small group was nice enough to let me try the brushes, and then they've been showing them ever since. And so it's been just amazing, really, really great opportunity for synergy. I try and do my end to make really good brushes. I have the best warranty in the business. And you do yours just by showing considerable talents combined with some good brushes, and it really makes a difference. It inspires confidence, I think, on the part of the user. And it's because of the way the brushes work, it allows you to do precision where with traditional brushes, probably couldn't do it as easily or as readily. So it's just easier to work with. Sorry about the rant. I've had too much coffee today. I can tell already.
It's okay. It's okay. You've got all this experience and knowledge and passion to share, and I'm excited about that. It's nice to have somebody else share all that good stuff. And you know, a lot of my subscribers, when I mentioned that I may be having this opportunity with you, were so excited and so supportive of that. They're waiting for this recording to launch on my site. So I'm really pleased that you're here, and so are a lot of other people. So that's great.
Well, thank you. I just can't tell you how touched I am. It's funny. I love doing the work, but the social part of it, I've never really settled into. I guess shy is the term. It's kind of a funny term for an old man, but let's call it humble.
Yeah.
And it's just a very unique thing. It shows you get busy doing the shows, but this type of thing is I think I've done like 3 or 4 of these conversations, and it takes me into unknown territory every time. So hopefully I don't get myself into too much trouble. So let's talk about you a little bit. Tell me about your background in painting. How long have you been doing? How did you get your start? How did you gravitate towards doing teaching on YouTube as you do?
You know, the world is a wonderful place, and people are amazing, as you've already attested. About
Absolutely.
about 12, 15 years ago, I started an arts council for the grassroots in our community. There wasn't anything for the creatives on the ground. So launched that and got to know a lot of creatives. And through that, I was able to try watercolor. And I don't know about you, but my sound is kind of bouncing back. Is that a,
It is. There's a little bit of a lag between us, and it's breaking up just a tiny amount, but I'm following along.
I hope it's not too bad here. Let me if I can. I don't think I can switch. Anyway, was given an opportunity to try watercolor one day. I'd always wanted to, but was always told it was too hard, and you know, I got on with other things, and had an opportunity to try it and realized that I could just see so many things happening with this pigment and then this paper and water and building that relationship. So I went home, dragged out some of my kids' old school paints and things, and just started to play. So I'm self-taught, and eventually through YouTube and different venues or options, discovered some of the materials that I like to use. And in fact, I first learned about your brushes through Steve Mitchell, one of his videos, The Mind of Watercolor.
Oh, cool.
And so
Steve's
immediately had to
fabulous
get
guy.
one. Yep, had to get one. So got my first little goat hair, and found the paints that I love to work with, and just started to paint. And then about just about not quite a year ago, I guess, a fellow by the name of Lorenz Pillard from Process Art Discovery was working with a friend of mine, Roger Lee, who's a picture framer in Kelowna, amazing creative person, and they were doing some art talks, and they asked if I would come and sit in and just talk about art in the community. So we did a few of those videos, and through the course of that, Lorenz said, "Have you ever thought of a channel?" And I said, "Well, not really, but I'm game." And the rest, as they say, is history. I have, I'm thinking by my birthday on May 2nd, I'll have over 10,000 subscribers. And that's exciting. And the feedback is just, it brings me such joy to know that I'm a little piece of sharing what creativity can do in your life, and supporting people in celebrating that creativity, no matter what it looks like. And you know, building these partnerships, not only with my paint and my paper, but the beautiful brushes and the tools I get to use Yep. It's just all part of it, and I don't know, for me, every second of it is joyful. And, I just think you can't go wrong if you're bringing joy into your life and celebrating that.
Absolutely correct. And I find the same thing with my own creative process. I've always had that side to me. For many years, I worked as a technical consultant in the information technology world, and I still do from time to time. And I always enjoyed the work because it's very demanding, and I'm really good at problem solving. It's a skill that I kind of stumbled into, but it's fun for me. And then I carried the skill set over into the brush making that kind of comes into the background of how I came to make, as the one example, the goat and synthetic blend. And what I try to do in a way similar to yours is that I find there's a huge variety of different techniques people use just naturally. And I try and help people with their natural skill sets and extend them by matching a particular type of brush to that. Some people have a really fast hand, and some people are much more meticulous, and some people actually do both depending upon what they're doing. And so I work with a bunch of different hair types, far more than I offer, and I think I offer more different types of bristle material than just about anybody else right now. But it's all intended because it matches both techniques, and then potters are a big customer base of mine. They use very different techniques and very different brushes than does a watercolor artist. And then those who use more viscous things such as like oils or gouaches or and more, what's the term, solvent-based materials will use something different as well. And so I have a different set for all of that. Plus, unlike what I think most other brush manufacturers do, I generally ask for feedback from people. I say, what can I do to make this work better for you and to make it more comfortable? And so over the time I've done that, I've incorporated every one of the changes. I don't always keep them because sometimes it'll work for one person, but it won't work for a lot of people. And it's hard to offer a brush and then explain that, well, there's a small group of people that like to do that. So you kind of have to follow the middle as to where that goes. But still, that's part of the reason I have 16 different bristles. We were corresponding recently about deer hair and moose hair as examples. And they're both really cool, but they come into their own when you're using a much more viscous material. Potters are my main groups for buying both of those, and they work with glazes and oxides and envelopes and slips and things of that type. And the heaviest of them really take a long and heavy brush, and then it's just the nature of what potters do. They tend to work with more finely detailed things. A lot of the stuff is done on a wheel. It needs to hold a lot of material so they can accomplish what they need to. And so that's where brushes such as the moose hair and the deer hair and a few others come into their own really well. But they don't adapt really well for watercolors.
And I'm glad that
On the other hand, if you wanted to do
time to explain that to me, because I said to you that sounds intriguing to me. I'd like to, know more. And you explained that, and I thought, okay, well, that makes sense. And I realized then, if I didn't already know, just how invested you are in your artists and what it means to them, and understanding, what a potter needs and what a watercolor artist is looking for. And that's unheard of. I just have to commend you on that effort alone that you put into this.
Well, thanks. It's one of the differences between what I, as a single practitioner, do and like a Da Vinci brushes. You can never get direct feedback from them on anything they do or how they do it. And they just, and the brushes, to their credit, they don't really care in which manners they're used, but some are highly adaptable for some things and not so highly adaptable for others. One thing I will say about both moose and deer hair, going back to that just for another brief second or three, is that if you like to do dry brush things, they produce some of the most unique dry brush characters you can come across, because their deer hair is fairly soft as it goes, but with such long brushes, I make my deer hair in 2 and 3 hair bristle, 2 and 3 inch long bristle lengths, and the same with moose hair. They're both very fine, and they tend to be scratchy. So if you want to have like a good crosshatch or hash result, or the effect of grasses, they're really good for doing that type of thing. Fan brushes do the same, but they're such a small diameter bristle that they produce, once you get to know the footprint of different brushes, you can really pick that out. Whereas if you do things with like a deer or a moose, nobody's ever going to go, wait a minute, how did you do that? and they won't know how it was done. And of course, using the right brush makes complicated things fairly easy, you know.
Right.
And so that's where they really come into shine for watercolors and aqueous-based materials. Ironically, you don't see a lot of dry brush done in pottery because it just won't stand up to the firing.
Right.
It'll just, like, whatever you thought you did, it's just going to be a kind of a blur at the other side of the kiln.
Yeah.
So then most of my brushes are actually really well suitable for watercolors.
Yeah.
And part of what I do is, going back to the softness and the springiness, some people like a much more responsive brush. Others like something that is much softer to work with. Pony hair is another one we mentioned recently. And pony hair, some people are like me, a little overly caffeinated. And so they'll have a really fast hand, whether it's actually caffeinated or not is secondary. But pony is one of the few brushes that will keep up with that really well. And so you can load it very heavily and you can move your hand just about as fast as you can. You'll get a good consistent stroke out of it for pretty much the entire width or potentially several widths, depending upon the brush size of the artwork that you're working on.
Yeah.
And no other brush will do that. They'll transition from a nice uniform coat to a very dry brush to go in like half the width of a painting. So that's where something like that comes in really handy.
You know, and
it also, because it's such a soft.
Yeah, it's beautiful. What I do love about my little goat synthetic, and because I use it, one of the reasons I use it all the time is that it holds such a great load of water and pigment. And because I treat my brushes like my friends, they're my partners in what I do. And so I don't want to be scrubbing around trying to load my brush. I keep my paint juicy. I touch the tip of my brush in, and it just fills up, and I can use it for, you know, and it's like magic. I just love it.
Well, thank you. It's one of the techniques that I use is that the hair that you see on the brush is typically only a fraction of what's there. The goat and synthetic blend material I use is actually just about 3 inches long overall. And whether you buy a bristle length that is 3/4 of an inch or 2 inches, it actually all is 3 inches long. I hide most of it inside the ferrule. That's why when I offer the brushes, yeah, so that's like 1.5 inch long bristle, and so there's another 1.5 inch that's stuffed up inside. And some of it I use to bond the brush. So part of the technique to make the brushes, I should have pulled some stuff out, but I just put it all away because I was working with it. But part of the technique is to take, I'm looking for something that's a facsimile of a bristle. I don't have any just by themselves. Well, anyway, so it's about 3 inches long. And so part of what I do is I glue the bristle to itself so it holds together. And then another part of it is to glue the bristle that's assembled onto the inside of the brush. So you end up with that one, right, and that one as well with about, let's say I use up about 1/2 inch to glue the thing to itself and to the brush. But out of the 3 inches, you get 2.5 inches of brush out of it. So the end result is that even, it doesn't matter if it's a 3/4 inch long bristle, it still has all that stuff up inside of the handle that will hold water and media. And they are designed to produce a really fine tip. They respond differently than brushes with ferrules on them because the whole length of the brush is active. Part of the reason I put a lifetime warranty for materials and workmanship on them is the ferrule itself is one of the sciences of planned obsolescence for paintbrushes. Most people never realize it, but so you clamp a piece of metal on a piece of wood. Well, the wood's going to get bigger and smaller depending upon the time of the year. And also artists, your hand perspires and some of that goes into the wood. And what happens with the metal is that they spring, but they don't necessarily come back. So over time, the clamp between the ferrule and the handle will become loose. And then there's the other side where the ferrule connects to the brush bristle. And that if you've ever taken a paper clip or anything and you weevil it back and forth, well, it doesn't take too many times before it breaks because all that stress goes to one point. And brush bristles are exactly the same. So when the handle doesn't become loose, the brush bristles start to fall out. And then the manufacturers look at it as a commodity they want you to replace often. I come at all that stuff from the other side. I want it to last for years and years and years because people actually like it when they get a chance to get used to something.
Right.
And I'm also just compelled by my own nature to make a high quality item. So I produce both those things in a very different way. And that's why I can offer the warranty I do. Occasionally, when I'm making the brush bristles, what happens is that the tool I use to apply the glue, there's a little, so the back of the brush bristle, next time I do one of these, I have to remember to have the parts in front of me. I apologize for that. But what will happen on rare occasions, maybe, I don't know, 1 out of 1,000 or so, is that a little air bubble will form at the very bottom end of the brush. And where the air bubble forms, that's just with the glue doesn't touch it. It's not going to be glued together. So maybe I'd say roughly 1 out of 1,000 is realistic. The brushes will shed a little bit, and then I'm more than happy to replace them. It's a mistake. It's kind of built into the process I use to make them, and it's just impossible to apply something and then I never know for sure if it's there, but it's really rare when it does. I keep improving and improving. I changed it a bit so that now I actually vary the, I use it's like a syringe that I use, and I inject that into the back of the brush and try and get it in just like a 1/16 of an inch or a little bit more than that, and then use some force to push it that in. It's more a problem on the bigger diameter brushes than the smaller ones. The material I use starts out about as thin as water does, so it penetrates really well. But to wrap the bristles together, you have to compact them pretty well. And so sometimes the two forces just don't work the way I want them to. Most of the time, it actually works the other way. What makes a brush good is what's called capillary action. And you push something together and the pressure pushes the fluid. Well, same thing happens when you're putting glue in, and if I put too much glue or if it doesn't dry quick enough, then I don't end up with the paintbrush. I end up with the ice pick, and because the glue will work its way all the way through the brush. So it's one of the hardest things. I've thrown away hundreds, if not more than hundreds of brushes just because I use like 2 drops too much glue. So it's really precise, and every one is just a little bit different than the other one. So I try and do batches of 5 or 10 or so at a time. I would say I've really improved a lot. I used to lose like about 10% of what I made just because of that problem. And it's now down to I'll lose maybe 2 or 3 out of a batch of 100 at this point, unless something else goes terribly wrong. And because they're handmade, you just never know. So when I make brushes, I just need to make one. I always make at least 5 because I'm assured that in a given print, something is going to go wrong. So you just plan for that and move through it, and it's all okay at that point. So it gets a lot into the manufacturing technique. That's the fun part. That's what I do day in and day out. And that's how I try and improve refinement to make them easier and more reliable to make. But I don't see myself ever making a brush in the way that Da Vinci, which makes a perfectly good brush. I have no criticisms of them at all. But I don't ever want to be a high volume brush manufacturer because many people have told me my brushes will actually outperform just about anything in the commercial market, both for comfort, certainly for longevity, and for overall performance. So I try not to alter that basic design, but I also try and make it so it's possible. I can rant about that stuff forever. That's what I do. So
well, and one
but
of the
better part is the end result.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, the end result is always, what you send out, I'm sure each piece is just as exquisite as the next. I love telling people when I tell them about my brushes that you use upcycled material, and whenever I say that, I have visions of you, heading out of an auction with a taxidermy box under your arm or something, How do you?
Well, it's actually even more simple than that. Upcycled and repurposed and sustainable are very important buzzwords these days, and it's a real dilemma for me because I am, I don't know how to phrase this subtly, but I'm not so much into killing things. I realize it's a part of life is that we do that. But when I went into this, I didn't want to be part of the brush making business. They do some pretty nasty things to some of the animals, and you can't help what's done, but I also don't want to directly promote it. So I look through estate sales and online sales. Craigslist is my friend. There's a trick in Google. It's called Google Advanced Search. And I use the Craigslist.org site, and I will search for different types of brush hairs. And that way I can find somebody that, what happens with anything is you buy it, you love it forever. Sooner or later, you stop loving it and it goes into your closet, and then it gets forgotten about and ends up on the floor of the closet. And then there's these things called estate sales or garage sales or whatever you want. And that way, that's where I source most of the hair that I get. I told you about the goat hair. Goat hair in particular is sustainable and renewable. Literally, the animals get haircuts every now and again. It doesn't hurt them. I don't know if goats are sensitive to losing their hair. I would be, but it's falling out anyway, so I kind of got used to that. But goat hair, pony hair, a few other types that I use with are completely renewable. Other ones I get pelts that came through, I don't know what to call the marketplace, but the general consumer marketplace. And then if they're in great shape, I will repurpose them and take one. I've bought coats in the past before. I have bought pelts before. There's a thing called a boa that has fallen out of favor long ago, but it was really popular up until the 1940s and 50s, until they started to develop polar fleeces. People wore a lot of animal skin coats and jackets and so forth, and those are really good sources for what I use. And anyway, they allow me to get something that is older. Well, hair doesn't really age that much. They have recovered, archaeologists, I couldn't think of the word, have recovered. Excuse me, just 1 second. I forgot I had the phone on.
I can see Tracy's lovely fireplace burning in the background. That tells me it's a little cooler where you are than I am. We're up at, I think, plus 10 Celsius today.
Yeah, it is chilly up here. It was about 24 degrees when I got up this morning, and we're having rare sunny weather in the end of February, so that's helped a bit. Lovely. And but anyway, so I get a lot of materials that are repurposed, and then I buy as much as I can because you never know when you're going to be able to find it again. And it allows me to keep a good inventory on hand. I kind of build what I need to just for the demands and to try and stay a little bit ahead of them. That's one of the reasons that, let's say I get an order for 2 brushes, just to make a simple example. Then I'll make 5. If it's 3 brushes, I'll make 10 of them because some I just know I'm going to have more of them. But it allows me to not have to buy so often, and it makes me more immune from market fluctuations, which in recent years have been pretty demanding, especially in the last 2 or 3 years for the obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. But anyway, by being able to repurpose brushes and using upcyclable material, it takes the brushes away from the traditional manufacturing process. And I think probably the quality is better because consumer grade is really touchy about things, and you never really know what you get from traditional brush suppliers. Anyway, I don't want to get too far into that. It's more in the line of what I do, but it's more in the line of what most people are not all that concerned about. But my goal is all things is to do really high quality. Silver foxes are the same thing. Some of the silver fox bristle material is made from the guard hair, and so jackets are a great source of that. Some people have hats that are sources of that. The stuff I get is all 5, 10, 20 years old. Mm-hmm. So people just, they're not inexpensive when you buy them. So people take really good care of them. And it allows me to get a really good, super high quality. And even with that, there's only a small section of any particular thing I can use because critters being what they are, I need really straight hair for brushes, and different parts of the critter, the hair may not be so straight, or it may have suffered something from the fact that they are critters, and so I don't use any of that stuff. Yeah. And so anyway, there's a not too high a degree of stuff that is thrown away. I end up burying most of the pelts when I get them because I have feelings for these things were once living, So anyway, that's why I don't participate in the traditional supply.
Yeah. So I mean, with being a one-man show, you are. It's amazing. I mean, you're not only sourcing the material and creating the beautiful brushes and researching the needs of your artists, but you're also shipping. I've got just come to mind just now that I've got a lady, one of my subscribers in South Africa who has ordered your brushes and can't say enough about them. She keeps telling me how beautiful they are. And another lady from New Zealand who just messaged me and said, I got my Lebenzon brushes. I'm over the moon. She can hardly wait to get them moving. So you have to ship all over the world. So that's another piece of what.
Yeah, that is so cool to help. Yeah, that was another irony of this. As I said earlier, when I first started doing this, it was in the jaws of COVID, and I had to teach myself how to do shipping when there was not even anybody to talk to. I could go on about that for hours. I hadn't thought about it for a while, but yeah, I launched my website in, let me think, that was just around Atlanta. So around March, um, yeah, around March of 2020, and within a couple of months, um, my site had been visited by probably half the nations on Earth. And within the first year, it had been visited by people from every nation on Earth. I was blown away by that. And by the end of the first year I had it there, I had shipped to probably 30 nations. Now, I couldn't tell you how many. The last time I looked, it was 50 plus, and I probably gained another 20, maybe more than that since then. And I, it's again another never-ending technique of evolution. They change, the regulations change, getting things through customs without any headaches changes, packaging them changes. It just goes on and on. It's fun to do. Packaging and shipping is not my favorite part, but it is what the customer finally sees. So I try and do a really good job. I almost never have. I haven't had any shipping damage for probably the last 3 years. I started to use a shipping tube, which is really rugged by itself. And then I use a single post down the middle of it. I'm sure you've seen it. And I suspend the brushes from the post inside of blister wrap. And these are things I should keep by as ways to show it off. But yeah, that's all. You still have it. That's cool.
I'm such a, I don't know. I like to use everything at my disposal. So when this showed up, I thought, hey, I can use that for something. And so if you see this paint on the end of it, I've been using it for mixing and spreading things around. So yeah.
Yeah, well, part of the theme that I do is reusable things, and so everything that I put in the package is designed so it can be used again, including the package itself. And anyway, but it does a really good job of shipping. When I was a technical consultant, I worked with computers, and as I said, and the company that I bought thousands of computers from on behalf of my customers is Dell, and they've done it all. You know, they have to ship these. These can be 200-pound things anywhere on Earth, and if you want to get an excellent example as to how to do something, take a look at a Dell computer. They do absolutely everything right. Some people argue against that. The first rule in life is that, I'll put this politely, stuff happens, and so you have to be aware of that. But as far as packaging and shipping and not adding a ton of weight to the shipping process, they do absolutely everything right. So they were not a literal guide to me, but a figurative guide that said, you really need to suspend the thing completely inside and make it so that even in the event that there's a problem, you can recover from that problem. Like they like to use on the server boxes, 2 inches, 3 inches of foam padding. What it amounts to is what they call in cars a crumple zone. So you can, the padding will take the hit and it won't necessarily cause damage to the inside of it. And I do the same thing with the brushes. And nobody, like I said, the last couple of years at least has complained about anything showing up in bad shape. So that's I did it right. I'm glad to hear that. And I have my shipping boxes go from the smaller 13-inch tube up to some that are like 2 feet long, depending upon what I'm offering. So yeah, it's all, you have to pay attention to every detail of it. And then what I learned early on is that it has to liquid when it gets to the other side. And I'm a real utilitarian in how I do things. So I didn't want to wrap things in like white tissue paper, which would be the classic type of thing. It adds weight and it can create problems all by itself. The tissue paper can delaminate fibers. And if that gets on the brush, then naturally I get email and phone calls. Well, my brush is doing blah, blah, blah. And I don't want that to happen. So same token, that reminds me, most brush manufacturers, if not everybody but me, puts a type of starch. It's called gum arabic, or a variation of that. It can be like fabric sizing. And they'll put that on the brushes so that when you get it, it's a nice, rigid, hard, pointy tip on it. And I don't do that. I don't put anything on them because I want you just to be able to get the brush wet and start working with it. And so the brushes come very clean when you get them without anything on them other than what you want to add. Then I also provide instructions as to how to break in a new brush, which is a good way to use a brush anytime. In summary, that's just to ideally putting it in water or running it under the faucet for a few seconds, just to thoroughly saturate it, and then pull it out with your fingers a little bit. That gets trapped air bubbles out of it. Then soak it one more time, put pigment on it, and it's ready to go at that point. and most people are just astonished at how far it goes. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, when my packages have arrived, they've been just beautiful. I'm looking over, I've kept all of the instructions, all of the papers that come with it, and I've clipped them onto my little
Cool.
wall where all my paints hang, so I can share that with people who come into my studio and inquire about what I'm using here. And I can't say enough about how thorough and impressive your operation is. And
Well, thanks. It goes to my, I guess, mildly OCD nature of doing things. And I went to school for a long time before I was an IT consultant. I started my own business because, ironically, once I'd gone to school for 10 years, I was way too qualified for most people that were looking for somebody to work for them. So I always enjoyed messing with computers. They're entertaining for me. And at the age that I started that, it was way before there was an internet, but there were things called electronic bulletin boards, or BBSs for short. And you'd use a link and you connect to them and you'd leave messages and other people would leave messages. And I found at the outset when I was doing this that there's a huge need for people that didn't even know how to use computers. So I first started advertising through there. Well, as it turned out, a lot of those people not only have their own home computers, but they run small to mid-sized businesses. And so overnight, when I started working as an IT guy, by the way, this is before there was the term IT guy, I was being invited to businesses from two computers, well, one computer, up to in some cases like 150, 160 computers in multiple offices. And that kept me busy for 30 plus years. And I love the work because it's fun for me. I've done it all through school. And then, like I said, I'm really good at problem solving. And it was an awful lot of fun. But honestly, you do anything for 30 years, or actually my technical career spanned almost 40 years. It's time to look for other things to do and things that are more entertaining, which is how I started to go into the arts. I was very fortunate. And I was at the right place at the right time several times over. I could go on for hours about that. And it was just never ending entertainment for me. And it allowed me to do things I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So I would go back to it.
Fortunate for you, but also very fortunate for us. We're
And well, thank you.
pretty
It's
excited
just
to have
such an
this.
honor. It's cool.
Yeah. I was hoping you could,
Yeah.
because the audience is mostly watercolor artists, you could tell us your favorite contributions
Well,
to
for
the watercolor.
watercolor, sure, my favorite are my Goten synthetic blend brushes. They are what everybody likes the most, and they do such a good job. It's probably 80% of like the best brushes on earth are what those are, which is good enough for most people by far. I have a couple of other lines. There is a Kolinsky line. I just make a fairly limited set of those for doing really precise work. My Siberian Elk, which is a great springy brush. It's pretty much the best of everything. It's produces a very fine tip. It's super responsive. It holds a lot of liquid. It is, I'd say, my number 3 or 4 seller overall. My synthetic sable is my number 2 seller overall. It is a really springy brush, pure synthetic. Some people like to use, I guess the buzzword now is vegan brushes that don't use any type of animal for the basis for them. And that does everything. It doesn't hold quite as much liquid, all things being equal, but it has a great responsiveness, a super fine point. I think you held up one earlier, and there's no downside to it at all. And then my Silver Fox is my own particular favorite. When I work with the brush in my own studio, I use my Silver Foxes. I use them as solvent, but they're great with water-based also. And super fine point, great holding, and you can get a lot of nuance out of them. The tip of a Silver Fox brush is about 1/5 the diameter of a human hair. So really fine. And then you have to use a magnifying glass to see the tip on a new brush. And they hold up pretty well.
Is that what the itty bitties are made out of?
The itty bitties, I have 2 different lines. One is made out of an orange synthetic. It's springier and has a very nice tapered tip, also super fine. The other ones are made out of the Siberian Elk series. The Silver Fox is so fine that, yeah, probably. The Silver Fox is so fine that I tried making brushes for that size and they just don't work well. There's not enough brush there to do what it needs to. Excuse me, just a second. Let me try and clear the frog. Sometimes that shows up out of nowhere and it just stays with me for a few days. And
I hear you.
so then there's also the goat hair, which is the world over. Goat hair is the most popular type of brush. It goes by a few different names. One is wolf hair, one is camel hair, but they're all pretty much goat hair. There's different types of goats. Some is coarser. That is the stuff that I make that was originally intended for makeup brushes. And
yeah,
it's
very
got a
fluffy
nice
when they're
soft
dry,
skin.
but when you wet them,
They put it up really well. And they hold liquid like nothing other than, I mean,
Yeah.
Siberian elk is one of the better liquid holders, and but goat hair is on par with that. Where the two differ is Siberian elk produces a hair-like tip on it, and goat hair is a little bit softer. You can get a fine tip, but it's really hard to work on the tip of a goat hair brush.
Yeah.
And other manufacturers will literally take the brush and they make it like rigid on the end, and then they have tools to cut them so that that forms the tip. I use the tips as they are and then set them up so that they taper. I make a little cone shape on them, not by cutting it, by how I adjust the other end of the brush.
Yeah.
And so they have a natural tip, and that way you get a really nice uniform flow off of it. When you have a squared off tip, you can actually see the end result of that on the brush. So those are the favorites, and then similar to those are the synthetic lines for those that don't like to work with natural hair brushes. Those are my synthetic sable, my brown synthetic, and what changes with synthetic filaments is that they're all made pretty much the same way. The thicker the diameter of the material, the stiffer the brush is. And so my orange synthetic, as one example, is going to be different from anybody else's orange synthetic because mine have, what am I trying to say? The diameter of them, it's the same material as in my soft white synthetic or my synthetic sable, but it's thicker. And so it tapers to the same fine point. So what happens with the itty bitty brushes is they produce a super fine point, and the small ones will do the same. But by the time you get to a medium sized one, you have so much bristle material there, you can't get as fine of a tip out of it. It's just not doable. And so that's why I use progressively finer materials for the bigger diameter brushes. I offer all of them in a bunch of shapes, but people love to have the biggest possible brush in some cases with the smallest possible tip on it.
Yeah.
And that's where like the synthetic sable really comes into its own. And I'm always happy to provide guidance on that. One of the big differences between my art show booth is I can see a person's technique and I can match the technique to the brush in just a few seconds. I've seen it thousands of times at this point. And put the right brush in somebody, and then it's like a match made in an art show. So somebody that knows what they're doing, handing something to somebody that knows what they're doing. And it makes all the difference in the world. It's harder to do that. That's where people such as yourself, amongst many other ways, come in and you can show the brush's capability. But I can show you substantially the same results with 8 different types of brushes. But what matters is how it feels in your hand. So I always recommend that people try a few to see how the springiness is and then go from there. A lot of people have collections that run from 3. I have some people that have collected almost half of my offerings just because they like them as art. And also they're all painters too. So it's
I've
a real high
given them as
tribute to what I
gifts. They
make.
have been cherished, to people that I've given them to. I keep all of these goat and goat synthetic blends in the studio for my students so that they can feel what they're like in their hands and get a sense of how much water and pigment they can hold. And your brushes honestly have been a game changer for me and my art practice, honestly.
Well, thank you. You really honor me. I started to offer a variation. I offer what I call family sets of brushes. And so it would be traditionally like, let's say the 1.5 inch, it'd be a medium diameter, the medium diameter with a wangy handle, and a large diameter, all for 1.5 inch long bristle. I eventually got the idea that, what I should do is I should offer not necessarily the best, but the most popular brush for each size. So I started to offer a set that's still the Goat and Synthetic blend, but the small is I have to remember this off the top of my head. It probably won't be correct, but the small is a 3/4 inch one, and the medium is a 3/4 inch, and then the wangy handle is a 1 inch, and then the large is an 1.5 or 2 inch. And it allows each brush in its most popular form to go to folks, and it allows you to have a variety. And but at the same time, the basic nature of the bristle material is going to be the same. So they're very easy to master, and it's a really good blend. I have that on the website. I may have some of the lengths off, but you can also order them individually in whatever size. That happens a lot too.
Yeah. So
I'm trying to do more sets.
you need to go on to Tracy's site and have a look. I don't have any of the wangy handles here. I've given them all out because, like I say, for me, it's the most treasured gift I think I can give another artist is one of your brushes. So I don't have any of the wangy handles left here, but go to Tracy's website and can you tell us what that is, Tracy?
Sure, it's Lebenzon-paintbrushes.com. Or you can just look up Tracy Lebenzon handmade brushes. You'll be able to find it that way.
Yeah, and we'll put a link in the description here as well for you.
Cool. And we're also running a promotion on behalf of this show. Use the coupon Lynda, Lynda, and I'm currently running a 20% discount for the brushes.
Oh, thank you. That's so generous.
Well, thank you back. And anyway, I'll try not to rant on that one. When I was going to school, I was originally going to be a college professor. And so when you do that, part of the education that you get is how to run your mouth on and on and on about things, because that's what you do in academics. And all that time I was messing with computers. And I found that when you go to school, you pretty much take a vow of poverty. I worked all through school, and I was lucky to get some grants and some loans that took me like 15 years to pay back for the loans. And I was very fortunate when I came out of school. I was talking about the bulletin boards. I like to mess around with that, even before I was done with school. And I found that while I couldn't find a job, there's an awful lot of people that had an interest in computers. And so I flocked to that. I looked back into going into academics many times. One of the luckier moments of my life is that a group wanted to hire me at a college just down the street from me to become a professor. They offered me literally off the street a 10-year job. That just doesn't happen anymore. And but I was so busy with my day job that I just didn't want to give it up, So I got the opportunity, pretty good living, and I just couldn't walk away from that at the time. Letting go is a very hard thing to do. And I still look back on it. I have on 4 or 5 other occasions thought about going back to teaching because I really enjoy it. And all of this goes to show is why I tend to run my mouth forever once I start, and I don't know when to stop.
It's always lovely to hear from someone who has so much knowledge and willing to share. And you have a great way of sharing that, and it's been great. I think our time is winding up here, so I'm thinking maybe we need to do this again. Maybe have you decide something that you really want to focus on and share with our watercolor audience, and we'll set this up and do it again somewhere down the road.
Sure, that's cool. We could work together. You can operate the brushes, and I can describe how they're made, and I'll make some notes to myself to put together some typical unassembled parts of the brushes. I think it takes me about 50 steps to make each brush. I would not want to walk anybody through the tedium of making them. It makes a real cool product, and everything is done for a rock solid reason. But I don't think most of the world would really care about that. A small number of people that want to knock me off would care about that. That's the paranoid side of me. But most people would just never do the work that I do, because you can get something that looks the same for just a fraction of what I make, but they don't behave the same. They don't have a lifetime guarantee. And I would dare say, and I say this because I've been in major art shows and it feeds my ego if nothing else, but they are considered high art in what they do. And it's funny in a way, but if you do anything well enough, it turns into art. And that's how I started into this. And my OCD nature is what carried it where it is. Plus, I just like to do things right. One of the things I've learned over my many years, you go to school for a long time, and there's a lot of details that goes into, I wrote papers primarily. There's a lot of details that goes into writing a good paper. It has to be technically correct, grammatically correct. It needs to be typed, and the spelling has to be correct. And by the way, it really helps if it's entertaining to the reader. And that's one of the things I always try to do, is to bring a character into it. Well, the same thing goes through in art. It's all the same in that regards, except rather than working with text, you're working with spectacular artwork such as what you do. And you have that down to a very high art. It's been forward from the outset how good your art is. And I thank you. It's really been a pleasure chatting with you. And yeah, let's put together something that we can do to collaborate on it in the future.
That would
And
be
I
fun.
can bring in some of the technical stuff that I do. Terrific. Well, again, check out the coupon, and I thank you so much for this opportunity. I just can't tell you how much. It's just really honors me to be able to get a chance to share a little bit about what I like to do for fun.
Well, I am just thrilled
Especially somebody else that
to see your face and hear your voice and be able to celebrate. You're the sort of ultimate creative in my eyes. I just love everything that you've got going on.
Well, it's your job. You're the ultimate creative. I'm a good technician. But Lynda, it's really been a pleasure. I can't thank you enough for this opportunity.
All right. Thanks so much, Tracy. We'll connect again soon, I hope.
Absolutely. We will.
All right. Enjoy the rest
Talk
of
to you
your
then.
day in your lovely, warm, cozy studio.
I will definitely do that.
All
I've
right.
got a bunch of things to do. That girl that I talked about yesterday, I have to start getting it out and doing the final touches on it and then getting them on their way.
Awesome.
Thank you again, Lynda. Take
All
care.
right,
Have a great weekend yourself.
Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Me too. I'm honored. Take care, Bye-bye.